Are you ready to face the disgusting truth about sexuality in World War II? It's a truth that many people have tried to sweep under the rug, but it's one that needs to be addressed. Behind the scenes of war, soldiers and civilians alike were engaging in a variety of sexual activities, some of which were illegal and morally reprehensible. What kind of sexual activities were these? Who were engaging in these activities? What were the consequences and how did these activities affect the war? These are all questions that need to be answered if we are to understand the true horror of the sexual depravity that occurred during the war. It was an uncomfortable and often taboo subject during World War II. Nobody realized the gravity of this sexual misconduct. But this is the 21st century, and we can finally discuss it openly, without any fear and shame. So for the next few minutes, just prepare yourself for the disgusting truth about sexuality in World War II and the questions that come with it. Sexual activities existed then. During World War II, some of the most horrible and filthy sexual behaviors were witnessed. In some situations, the soldiers actively participated in these acts, while in others, civilians were subjected to them. The incidence of rape was one of the most upsetting aspects of the war. This was especially true on the Eastern Front, where the Soviet Red Army frequently employed rape as a weapon of war. It is reported that up to 2 million women were raped by Russian soldiers during the Battle of Berlin in 1945. There were also several tales of rape camps where women were held captive and subjected to horrifying sexual assault. Re-germanisation. During World War II, a term that was very much highlighted is re-germanisation, and when women were being re-germanized, it was scary for a lot of European women. It was a time when their lives were in danger, not just because of the war, but because of the Nazi government's re-germanization programs. The Nazis thought that if they wanted to fully Germanize a community, they had to keep control over the women who lived there. This was done in a number of ways, including, but not limited to, forcing people to get married, have abortions, or get sterilized. This was done to improve the lesser races. Because of their political views and jobs, women were also taken away and sent to concentration camps. Many of the women who were rounded up were sent to camps for people with mental illnesses. Some of the women in the country were even more worried about the re-germanization process. As a way to get back at women and show them their place in the Nazi hierarchy, the Nazis let and even encouraged local police to rape and abuse women. Many of these women were also forced to have children for the Nazi cause, and their babies were taken away from them after they gave birth. A big part of the re-germanization movement was getting involved in arranged marriages. Even if they had already agreed to get married, women were often forced to marry Nazi officers or other men who supported the Nazi regime. This was done to make sure that women were seen as German citizens and to give the Nazi dictatorship a stronger foothold in the area. The Nazis also used propaganda as part of their plan to turn women back into Germans. They tried to make them look like the perfect Aryan women to the public, which meant that they were expected to act, dress, and talk in a certain way. Also, women were expected to do things that men usually did, like work in factories or join the military. A lot of the victims, who were women, found the process of re-germanization to be very traumatic. A large number of women were hurt both physically and mentally, and some of them never fully got over it. Also, the process caused a lot of chaos in their families and communities, leaving many of them feeling alone and powerless. Due to the re-germanization of women, many European women went through hard times during World War II. The Nazis tried to control and manipulate the women in the countries they took over so they could get a better hold on those countries. Women were forced to get married and have abortions, and they were also hurt physically and emotionally. In modern times, the effects of this time period are still being felt. A lot of women are still dealing with the trauma they went through during this time. Comfort stations. During the war, the Japanese Imperial Army established a network of comfort stations across Southeast Asia, where women were forced into sexual slavery. In some cases, these women were coerced into performing sexual acts against their will. Furthermore, in many occupied territories, Nazi soldiers forced local women into prostitution in order to provide them with additional income. Estimates of how many women were involved vary, with most historians settling on 50,000 to 200,000. Specific statistics are still being explored and discussed. The majority of the women came from occupied nations such as Korea, China, and the Philippines. The young women who ended themselves in these comfort stations were frequently forced to be there. They were uneducated and destitute, or they were sold by their family, or they were misled about the purpose of their recruitment. Under Japanese colonial control, Chinese, Korean, and Dutch women were also coerced into sexual slavery. They worked as nurses, seamstresses, and cooks during the day, but were often raped at night. The brothels were originally constructed to offer soldiers a sexual outlet in order to lessen the occurrence of wartime rape, which was a cause of escalating anti-Japanese sentiment across seized regions. Despite the purpose of minimizing rape and venereal illness, the comfort stations exacerbated rape and transmitted venereal disease. According to testimonials, several young ladies were stolen from their homes in imperial Japanese-ruled countries. The initial victims were Japanese women who were enslaved in military brothels and trafficked across Japan. Japan's colonies and occupied regions and overseas battlegrounds, and Okinawa. Local intermediaries charged with obtaining women for the military frequently duped them with promises of jobs in industries or restaurants. Propaganda in certain cases lobbied for equity and the sponsorship of women in higher education. Other enticements included deceptive advertising for nurse jobs at outposts or Japanese army bases. Once recruited, they were imprisoned in comfort stations both within and outside their countries. A sizable proportion of comfort women were minors. Medical experiments. In this bloody battle, not all sexual behaviors were as obvious as rape or sexual enslavement. Sexual exploitation was institutionalized in some circumstances through medical experiments. The Nazis carried out a number of experiments on concentration camp inmates, including sterilization and the injection of unknown substances into the victims' bodies. These tests were carried out without the victim's consent and were frequently highly painful. These experiments included intentionally infecting inmates with diseases like tuberculosis and syphilis, performing surgeries without anesthetic, and injecting women with experimental medications. Female detainees were also subjected to severe physical and psychological abuse, including sexual abuse and rape. The experimentation and torture frequently left the women in a condition of great physical and psychological anguish, and many of them died as a result. Those who survived frequently experienced lifelong bodily and psychological harm, including disfigurement and long-term psychological anguish. Consequences of sexual activities in World War II. Women in other regions of Europe might have consensual sexual relationships with foreign soldiers. While these partnerships may have offered both sides emotional support, they frequently resulted in unwanted pregnancies and societal censure. Women who became pregnant as a result of these encounters were sometimes shunned by their families and communities. Furthermore, the effects of sexual actions during World War II had a long-term impact on Europe's social and cultural landscape. For example, an increase in premarital sex led to a fall in marriage rates, affecting the post-war European population. It also established a societal acceptability of sex outside of marriage, which has persisted to the present day. Overall, the implications of sexual activity during World War II were far-reaching and had long-term consequences for those involved. While the physical and emotional pain suffered by women forced into sexual slavery was especially severe, even consenting sexual acts had long-term consequences for those involved. So people, that's all for today. Tell us in the comment box what you think about today's video and how we can uplift the females of our society who really need it. Hey, please make sure you hit the bell icon for more historical videos like this.